I could imagine a few planes could use a Tarrare.
Wow. It took me a while to get that, but that's really dark.
And welcome to our channel.
I'm Prams, and I'm here to tell you crazy stories from around the world.
And I'm Dan, and I embellish those stories for my own amusement.
We're pretty new here, but if you're enjoying what we're doing, please give us a like and subscribe. Picture the hungriest you've ever been.
Oof, we've all had those nights. You know, you leave in a bar, you're going straight for the kebab shop, you realise it's not open. So then you have to go home because there's nothing open. So you go home, all you have is water in the tap. But then you do dig out the freezer and you're like, oh, a microwavable meal. You get it in the microwave. Your nose is pressed up against the window. You're looking up at the time, you know, each second is an eternity. Is that the kind of hunger you're talking about?
I mean, think hungrier.
Ooh, that's a tall order, I'm going to be honest.
Past the cravings, past starving. Like you haven't had food in weeks and your body is about to shut down. Every thought is food, primal and consuming, drowning out everything else.
Like I said, I've had those kind of nights before. You know, as I said, you walk out the bar, kebab shop, it is shut.
Dan, you know, you don't know, especially after you hear about this guy. Because in 18th century France, there lived a man whose hunger never turned off. Not after meals, not after feasts, not after swallowing things no human body should be able to survive. His name was Tarrare, and doctors documented everything because they couldn't believe his condition was real either. This is the story of the hungriest man in the world. France in 1772 was a patchwork of ancient stone villages connected by dirt roads, where most people never traveled more than a day's work from where they were born. If something strange happened to you, if your body betrayed you in some inexplicable way, there was no science to explain it. Only whispers of curses or divine punishment. And you'd likely die without anyone beyond your village ever knowing your name. It was there that Tarrare started out just as a normal child, with an ordinary appetite. A timid boy that mainly kept to himself. And then puberty arrived, and something inside him broke.
Balls dropped.
Yes, but also he started to feel hungry, like really hungry. He scoffed down meals meant for entire families. Then, an hour later, he'd be begging for food, shaking from weakness. And you'd think a guy who ate this much would be packing on a few pounds, right? Not Tarrare. He was so thin, you could count all of his ribs. He actually looked sickly, hollowed, and starved. Feeding him became impossible for his family, financially and physically. So while just a teenager, his family kicked him out, unable to afford to feed him. Tarrare turned to the streets, where he had no choice but to make his hunger into a performance. Crowds gathered as he swallowed corks, stones, and live animals, and anything the audience would give him. They all assumed it was some kind of trick, a sleight of hand, and no one could figure out how. But we know this was no trick. How much longer could he survive like this? When war came to France a few years later, Tarrare enlisted immediately. Not out of patriotism, but desperation for guaranteed army rations that might finally quiet the gnawing void inside of him. But before he saw the battlefield at all, he collapsed from hunger and exhaustion, despite being fed 4 times his fellow soldiers' portions. He was admitted to a military hospital where doctors witnessed behavior that defied all medical understanding. At the hospital, Tarrare spent his days scavenging garbage piles, He drank blood from medical waste containers. He even disappeared into corners where the bodies were kept. The doctors turned him into a bit of a freak medical experiment. They fed him all kinds of nasty things, enormous quantities of organs and live animals. Tarrare's abdomen would swell up like a balloon after these feedings. Then it would deflate within hours. He produced almost no weight gain. It's like his body burnt everything instantly. And apparently, his smell was unbearable. Witness accounts reportedly mentioned a sickly, rotting odor that clung to him constantly, as if his metabolism was running too fast for his flesh to keep up. After months of experiments and observations, doctors remained equally dumbfounded, unable to explain or diagnose what was wrong with Tarrare.
Poor guy. I mean, he really had an insatiable hunger, didn't he? Wow. You said the hospital were feeding him different things, right? So I imagine they're like, here's a rat. Okay. You know, here's some staples. Interesting. Here are the financial records of the last 12 months. Then they slide over. Here are the documents of patients that have passed away in the last 12 months. Yum. I mean, I feel for the guy. I really do. But I bet be a nightmare at work. You know, like, who's eating my sandwich out the fridge? It had my name on it. You know, everybody's looking at Tarrare. I know it's him. We're seeing what he eats.
Well, like the doctors, the military had no idea what was wrong with him. But they did have an idea on how to weaponize his unique talents. If Tarrare could swallow anything, maybe he could transport secret messages across the border. The world's first biological encryption device. So, military decided to give their spy his first mission. They got him to swallow a wooden crate filled with secret documents and walk across enemy lines. The plan was to have Tarrare poo-poo the intelligence out and hand it over to the military's moles. That plan failed colossally. Turns out that a strange man wandering the streets alone behind enemy lines drew immediate suspicion. Tarrare was immediately captured, imprisoned till he poo-pooed out those secret documents, then released back to the French military, where he was readmitted back into the hospital.
The government getting involved again. They're always getting involved with this stuff, you know. If it's weird, they're like, oh, let's get involved with that, you know. So what was it? They saw Tarrare in the corner. He's eating balls. And then, you know, the private tells Sergeant his plan and he's like, Johnson, I think a plan just might work. So they get him in the country and they smuggle him to the other side. And he shit it out. But it's foul, I imagine. It's pretty pungent. But it's some guy's job to extract the documents, right? Step in the new recruit. And he's like, and their sergeant is like, I have a top secret mission for you. And he's all excited. Yeah, anything for the cause. Like I said, it's a top secret mission. I want you to walk over to there and sort through that meaty dump. And he's like, what? And he's like, that Bavarian mudslide over there. I want you to sort through it. Yes, Private. I want you to go through that holy loaf. That chocolate chopper. Okay, but I guess if they got it through, it's a win for France.
I guess, but they didn't end up getting it through.
Yeah. Now every time I send poo emojis, I just imagine they're like real life. That's how they communicated, through sorting through
I don't even know how this would work logistically, right? Because you've got stomach acids that like burn through whatever you eat. So it's like at least the paper and the ink from the pens would have disintegrated, right? You can't imagine a whole document to just pass right through. You've got a tiny little hole. How is that gonna?
Yeah, well, it's a box, right?
Yeah, you've got a whole box. So I don't understand how they think
Yeah,
it's gonna work.
so how did he swallow that? I mean, how big is this
Do you
box?
think it was like a shaggy sandwich? He just went, ah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, probably.
And then it comes out the same way, like, blah.
And he's the kind of person that will just eat anything, right?
Yeah.
He just, I've got to throw it. But then he's
chewing.
like, I never thought about it coming out the other way.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to be losing my virginity at this point.
I mean, I don't think the government had fully thought this through.
I'm just going to add it to the list of bad ideas that they've had. They've had so many, and they're not letting up anytime soon, I don't think. So, to be honest, I think they should have thought bigger with this idea. They should have parachuted him in behind enemy lines, sneaked him into the Resistance HQ. He's then taken them out one by one. He's just eating them.
Yeah.
You know? Someone pulls a gun out on him. Bam, bam, bam. Oh. Whoa, and then he's, instead of like, oh, swallow this box, walk down the street, like, send him in. He's lethal.
True.
He's lethal. He's already had practice on the dead bodies, so send him in. He's good to go. Weapon of mass destruction right there.
Actually, yeah, I don't know why they didn't do that instead.
Yeah, right.
That solves his hunger and...
Because we've been talking about government having bad ideas. I've just come up with an epic idea. It would have been a great idea for Friends. They could have just, okay, extract him. Okay, who else do we not like? Send him in. Send him in.
It's a shame they didn't come up with that idea because the army eventually stopped trying to use him. But stopping the experiments didn't stop Tarrare's hunger. Tarrare remained in hospital, not as a curiosity anymore, just a man trying to exist between meals that never felt like meals. But stopping the experiments didn't stop the hunger. Then one day, a baby in the ward disappeared. No blood, no witnesses, no proof. But suspicion doesn't need evidence when fear already has a face. Every eye turned to Tarrare. That was enough.
I could imagine a few planes could use a Tarrare.
Wow. It took me a while to get that, but that's really dark.
Just as a deterrent, you're like, Tarrare's on this plane, FYI.
Jeez.
Maybe leave your baby at home.
Wow.
This is going to be a 50-50 split of people on my side and not on my side.
Not on your side.
Well, my 3 followers will be all on my side.
Oh my gosh. See, Tarrare was thrown out almost immediately from hospital. Not charged, not tried, just removed. Because the problem would leave with him. He begged the doctors before going for anything that could help cure him. Tonics, medicines, tobacco remedies, wine concoctions. He didn't care what it was called, as long as it quieted whatever lived inside him. But there were no solutions. Nothing ever did. After years of being cast aside, with no one left who could or would help him, Tarrare's body finally gave out. 4 years later, he passed. He was only 26. When surgeons attempted an autopsy, they were met with a grotesque impossibility. Organs bloated far beyond what humans should carry. Tissues corroded and diseased in ways that made them recoil. Some accounts say they had to halt the examination entirely. The body simply could not be catalogued or explained. Even in death, Tarrare refused to make sense. To this day, medicine still debates what truly afflicted him. A metabolic disorder? Endocrine disease? Neurological damage? None fully explain the extremes he endured. So, who was he really? A grotesque freak of nature, driven to unimaginable lengths by a hunger no one could comprehend? Or a desperate man, trapped in a body that demanded everything, leaving nothing for the man inside?
Another good story. I think it's a sad story, to be honest. I feel like people just used and abused him, and all they wanted was help. And like, we're gonna get you swallow a box and put you in the war and send you over to the other side. Just seemed like, I don't know, it was a bit sad. I think you said that his intestines were like diseased and, you know, they're really, really wide. And that's probably his problem. They were so wide that food was just going straight through and they probably couldn't extract the nutrients.
Yeah.
You know, if it's really diseased, then that's probably the problem that he's got. And so he's just eating and eating and eating.
Yeah.
But it's just passing straight through him is what I think.
Yeah, I think some accounts said that like you could look down his mouth and it was just like a hole straight through.
Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know if that's possible or true, but whoa.
Yeah, wow, cool. But yeah, sorry, Tarrare. I think if he lived in today's time, he'd have a sick YouTube channel, you know? He'd be like, oh, I have some food, you know?
Oh, yeah.
There's loads of food channels
What
that
do
are
they
out
call
there
them? Like
now.
mukbangs?
Yeah, but like, you know,
know?
usually have those YouTubers like have 2 bites and pretend to eat all this food, but he doesn't, he just eats it. He'd be a celebrity. You know, he would have celebrities coming over to him like, hey girl, how are you keeping it off? You know, and it was like, you know, he'd be famous, I think.
Yeah,
you know?
he'd
And
be
he was,
on,
he was
like-
kind of famous then, but he'd be famous with money.
Yes.
And he'd be able to buy as much food as he wanted.
He'd be on like diet commercials, like diet pill commercials, eat anything you want and be like Tarrare, a face of Ozempic, you know?
Yeah, he could have been like, it could have been a document destroying machine. Think about how many companies need to get rid of their documents, you know, just give them to Tarrare.
The shredder was never invented because it just used Tarrare.
Just used Tarrare, just went from business to business, you know, all the big ones, like feed the stuff in, you know.
So, is there a moral of the story in all of this?
Moral. They should have entered it into a hot dog competition.